Article 11, allowed planned development in ID2 zoning district.
Good evening, Rick Freiberg from TEC, the civil engineer for the project, representing Lupoli Companies, who's the owner of the 146 Dascom Road site. Rather than, I think, recite through the articles again, because I know we just did that on Monday night, so I'm sure they're still fresh. I've been thinking over the last few days and reflecting back on what I heard on Monday night, and trying to make, I guess, a more spirited effort to get to the root of it and to the heart of what the articles are presenting. First, though, I want to applaud the work that the task force has done. They met again this morning at 7:30. I think that makes like 7 or 8 meetings in about a month. And what I've been really impressed with is the level of enthusiasm that they've attacked all the different issues that are being raised with. Things that, frankly, we don't think of all of them, as we put together the project, and they've really brought them all to the forefront, and we look forward to them vetting them. The second thing I wanted to address was that we heard some concerns on Monday night about the waivers provision that's listed in the article. That's section 7.2.3.6 was the waivers provision. And I wanted to elaborate a little more on what the provision is, explain it a little better maybe than I did on Monday night. As you know, the Dascom Road project is bound by Dascom Road, but also Smith Drive, Smith Way. And the reason we're looking to incorporate the flexibility of waivers was to work closely with the planning board to incorporate the best possible design for the site. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. The way that the property lines are set up today, the nearest building to Smith Drive would be about 100 feet. The nearest building to Dascom Road would be about 50 feet. Okay. Now the normal, non-visitor to the site, the passerby, is obviously more likely to see and drive across the frontage along Dascom Road. Our idea with providing this flexibility is that the board would be able to consider waivers, not automatically grant them, but consider waivers that led to a better design. And in this case, that would mean reducing the setbacks along Smith in favor of providing more setbacks along Dascom Road. So that was the spirit and intent of it, is to allow the flexibility for the board to work with any specific site, not just ours, because we're aware that this applies all through ID2. So work on those specific site projects with the constraints that exist on each site and come up with the best possible design. In our site's case, for example, we have a case in front of the planning board right now, the all-commercial version of the project, that's seeking no waivers, no variances whatsoever, and it's the same size. So it's not like it's a critical pressing thing to the project to waive, to get all these waivers. What it will do, I can tell you, in the PUD version of the plan, if we pull the buildings away from Smith Road to meet the current setback requirements, the green space in the middle of the site gets a little bit smaller, and that's about the end result of it. Now, there are tests that have to be satisfied by the planning board to even receive a waiver in the first place, but our idea with this mechanism was to provide a way for the planning board to be flexible and consider site-specific constraints and come up with the best design that's possible, rather than a one-size-fits-all zoning setback. So that was the intent of it. The other thing I wanted to talk about...
I'm sorry, Mr. Freiberg, you mentioned setbacks, but how about stories? You're capped in Appendix A, the Table 2, it's capped at 4 stories. That also would be subject to the discretion of the planning board.
It actually already is.
Right?
Yeah, it actually already is under the current zoning. There's a footnote under that basically states that, and I won't say that exactly right on the spot like this, but the gist of the footnote is this, that if at the planning board's discretion, they may allow you to increase stories as long as your total square footage is not exceeded as part of it. They would only do that if they deem it to be in the best interest, whether that's through architectural design and the like. But the project that's in front of the board now, as an example, 600,000 square feet, maximum height 4 stories.
Right. Okay, but the waiver provision says that they can waive, and again, going over what we talked about before, the standards are fairly subjective, right? As they're worded, if it's in the interest of design flexibility and overall project quality, or if the waiver will allow the project to achieve a high-quality design, incorporating a desired mixed space, affordability, mixed uses, and personal character. So there's a level of subjectivity there that gives the planning board the ability to, kind of go through that. But does that apply to all these dimensional requirements, not just the building height, but the building coverage? For example, mixed use shall not exceed 40% for new construction. Are they allowed to waive that or allow you to go beyond that?
I don't believe that they're allowed to waive the 40% one, but in any event, the second thing that I was going to say, Mr. Landry, and this might be helpful to this discussion, if it was in the board's, we believe it was important because it allowed for flexibility for the best possible project. We can live without the provision. We can live without the waivers provision, period. So if it made the board feel more comfortable with the zoning change, we're happy to incorporate that, striking that waivers provision from the article as part of our amendment on town floor meeting.
And that's your choice as a private warrant, but as a board, we have to vote on the article as written,
Fair.
which of course includes the waivers, but I just wanted to make sure I understand this. As written, the waivers now, may waive dimensional requirements set forth in section 7.2.3 for planned developments, okay? So some of those things are that it shall not exceed 40% for new construction and expansion. They would be able to relax that, correct?
Correct.
Setback 20 feet from all property lines, they'd
Correct.
be able to relax that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot should have minimum frontage of 50 feet on existing public way, they could do that. And am I reading this right? Because I went through here and it looked as if you kind of follow the tables and follow the amendments in your article, the table you reference here, Appendix A, Table 1, 3.1, it goes down in, what appears to be happening here is that certain uses are being moved from requiring zoning board of appeals approval to being by right. Namely, a banking establishment use, a motel or a hotel, and a public transportation station or terminal, excluding airports. It appears as if those three uses, I'm on the second page of your article, are going from what's called BA, which is the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that little footnote B, if I'm reading this right, means that instead of having to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, those are all now by right. Am I reading that correctly?
It is, yep, that's correct.
Okay, because that, honestly, it's the first time I have heard that. And I discovered it on my own, just simply digging through and following the thread of these changes. So this is actually expanding the uses of, under this article, to things that currently would require the zoning board of appeals, to now being basically by right. Putting in a banking establishment, a motel or a hotel, or, and I'm not even sure where this would come into play, but public transportation station or terminal.
Where are you reading right now?
Okay, so if you go in the warrant article,
Look at the warrant article.
okay, go to, it's halfway down the second page.
It's a use block?
It's the table at the bottom.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so if you look in that table, and you look at use C5, banking establishment, and then underneath it, C16, motel or hotel, and E5, public transportation station or terminal, right? And all of those are coded as BA, right? But what's happening is a footnote is being added here, B, right? And that footnote B on the next page says allowed by right in planning development in IDT zoning district. So if I'm reading that correctly, that means things that are currently subject to a zoning board of appeals hearing would now be by right. Is that right?
Allowed by the planning board, correct?
Okay. Has that been disclosed in any of the materials? Because this was news to me, and I wasn't even sure if it was right until you just verified it. Has any of this been disclosed as far as what this article will do?
Yes.
It has? And where would I find that disclosed explicitly, that it would no longer require zoning board of appeals and make these all by right?
Well, in the warrant article in front of you was one place,
I'm
but
sorry, beyond this, any of the materials that you've been releasing to the public or on the...
they're also posted on the website. It's also in the hands of the task force. It's also been discussed at the number of public meetings we've been
Which documents would
hosting.
be explained?
I don't think anybody ever explained it to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to your point, I don't think anyone ever explained to us. Like, I didn't know, like, the planning board has the rights regarding building height or floors. But, and I think that was a big miss with this article, is nobody explained to us what or how this changes it. We have to read it to try to figure it out, how it changes, and you know, Bob did a good job reading it to assess that. You know, and it's not your issue, Rick, I'd say. I mean, you know, you're presenting the warrant article. I mean, I think you guys made this warrant article without input from the planning department, which kind of bewilders me, because I thought that this was kind of like a public-private partnership here as we started out with this whole project. I mean, I think Mr. Lupoli said weeks back that the town approached him to try to purchase this property and develop it. So I don't understand why the planning department didn't help refine this to be the best thing for the town of Andover, but someone missed explaining to us what this article,
Well, it's a private article, but I
Yeah.
think that
but still.
fundamentally, and I think that, is that something that's on your plate from a task force standpoint, Don?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question,
Is
Alex.
this, one of the reasons that the task force was in place was to distill this? Was this something that you were looking at, this article?
We have looked at the article, yeah. We haven't gone through it by detail. Again, what we're going to be doing is analyzing what does the article provide, what does the PUD provide, and the comparison between them. If there are issues that relate to the powers of the planning board, obviously we'll take a look at that too. So if there are questions on this that you want us to explore, let me know and I'll bring it back to the task force.
So what kind of, and maybe this is a question for Austin, what kind of authority does a planning board presently have? I mean, like this whole building height or floor height thing, I mean, is this something that you typically see the planning board has the authority to issue by special permit, or considering the conditions of the site?
So I'd have to look at what, we just we just had our first public hearing on the application brought under existing zoning, so the all commercial, no residential. So I have not waded into
Gotcha.
what kind of waivers we can grant. I don't know if the existing ID2 grants us the same waivers that the article as written would grant us.
Just for clarification, the section B in which Mr. Freiberg is referencing in the zoning bylaw, that affords the planning board the ability, the number, essentially what it allows is the number of stories may be increased and the lot coverage decreased correspondingly. So rather the development going this way, you shrink it, you provide more open space of the light.
Planning board can
and you
allow
go
it to
a
go
little,
up.
Vertical. And presently, this is allowed in the limited, the apartment district, limited service district, office park, mixed-use district, industrial G, IA, ID, and ID2. So that's presently on the books for all of those zoning districts today.
So you get some good authority to change the shape already.
Well, typically, if the topography were to be that the road was here and it went off, you would want to build higher so that you could, rather than sprawl this way.
So do we have like a
So that's the
limit?
kind of-
Does the zoning only allow, let's say, 4 stories right now, but you guys have the authority to allow it to go to 5 if you shrink it correspondingly?
Yeah, I guess, as part of the hearing process, if we say, oh, we can get this great benefit by building up and free up space, we're going to have an amphitheater. Okay, build up, that was something like that.
Okay.
But just to be clear, so that's something that's a footnote in the zoning table today, not proposed change by the article. And the other thing is, I'm not positive that anyone's ever actually acted on it in the years that it's been in the bylaw that I can recall anyway.
So that's in the zoning table today, the whole BAB?
The height.
The height thing,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. If I can continue on, if that's
Please go
okay.
ahead.
Yep, sorry. So one of the things, and actually I think, I was listening to Connie's presentation on Monday night, and he was also at planning board on Tuesday night with ID, and I share his sentiment about vehicles and traffic on roads, obviously. One of the things I heard him say, and I hadn't thought to articulate it the same way that he did, was that perhaps a good idea and a way to look at these projects is to capitalize on the number of tax dollars per vehicle. Is an interesting way to think about it. If you're picturing your development as being limited by the amount of traffic that it generates, so the idea here is if traffic is a limiting factor, then you should maximize the tax dollars received for each vehicle trip of traffic. That way the town realizes maximum value on the land while still maintaining minimal or similar traffic impacts. And that's what this article does. I mean, part of the reason why we've been advocating so hard for the article, even though it's coming to a lot of meetings and doing presentations like this, is because the number one concern we hear about the Dascom Road all-commercial project is traffic. And this planned development is a way to reduce the amount of traffic that's generated by the development compared to the all-commercial plan, while still generating similar tax revenues. So that's one reason why we continue to advocate really hard for it. The other obviously important reason is that we've heard from the town that senior housing is a need in town. As you remember, our original proposal from May town meeting was a combination of non-age restricted and age restricted housing. I think it was 25%. Age-restricted senior housing, what was in the proposal in May. Since May, we've obviously revised the parcel, or we've obviously revised the restrictions to be strictly senior housing only, no provision for non-age restricted housing.
Greg, may I ask, what's the price point? We're talking about senior housing 55. What price point are you envisioning for these apartments?
So between 2,000 and 3,000. But so there'll be variable footprints, obviously, for each of the different units. Some will be one bedroom, some might be two bedrooms.
Okay.
But between two.
Just to put this in the context
Yep.
of if we're going to be if the statement is that we're going to satisfy the senior housing need, the question is, do apartments at that price point satisfy the needs? So
Sure.
the question is, what is it? So it's
So
$2,000 to $3,000.
between 2,000 to 3,000, yep, per month.
Rental apartments.
Rental apartments.
Right.
But I think an important thing to note also is that the bylaw change that we're proposing does not do away with the 15% affordability requirement.
Right.
And you're probably familiar from just following events in town. I mean, they have lotteries to determine, for example, in some of the high-end age-restricted developments to get into the affordable units. So we're retaining the requirement of 15% of the units to be affordable.
And what's affordable? How's that defined? Is that a statutory thing? or
It's a
is it-
statutory thing. I think it's
Based on income?
based on income.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Based on median income in the area.
In the area, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So I only bring it up because we're talking about pricing, and 15% of the units are going to cost less than the rest of them.
And does the flexibility the planning board have, there's been consistently at 225 units. Is there, if you determine that maybe it makes sense to have more residential units and less office space or whatever, is that the kind of flexibility the planning board would have, would be to modify the use? Would that be within the bounds of what you could do?
No, I don't believe so. So we're capped, the way that the zoning reads now, we're capped with a 1 unit per 3,000 square feet of land area. I think if you ran the math on this site, that would yield about, I think it was like 239 units would be the absolute maximum. But within our plan development proposal, we've capped ourselves at 225 units. I heard a lot of discussion earlier about density as well, and since we're talking about caps, I think it's a good time to bring it up. As part of our project specific PUD, we've also capped our development proposal at 600,000 square feet, despite that by the rules, about 850,000 is allowable. The answer, can we have more units? I guess the technical answer would be up to about 239 total units, but we've restricted ourselves within the PUD to 225.
Right, but when you say you've capped the square footage at 600, you could go to 800, you're self-imposing that cap.
Self-imposing.
Okay, so if you get into if you move forward, get both your articles approved and move forward, since you do have up to 800, would the planning board have the discretion to increase you back up to the 800 if they chose so?
No, so one of the things that we built in was, and it's in the zoning language, but there's a thresholds category in there. We identified the need to define thresholds for projects. For us, the threshold that seemed most important and most pertinent was traffic, as it relates to the Dascom Road project. So what we've done in there is we've crafted that the maximum threshold is 10% more than what was approved at town meeting. So so there's a certain amount of traffic that's associated with the Dascom Road project as it would be approved at town meeting. If any changes in the design, office square footage, converts into retail or something like that, small changes like that are allowable, but anything that increases traffic by more than 10% over what was approved at town meeting requires a trip back to town meeting for authorization. So through the special permit process with the planning board, there is some flexibility up to 10% of traffic, but anything beyond that requires a return to town meeting for approval.
Okay, I did see that in your master plan. Is that the only metric, 10% increase? It's not It's not within a 10% increase in square footage or a 10% increase in it, it's just traffic, that's the
Yeah.
only metric?
Yeah, for us, and so what we did in the zoning article, and this is probably worth knowing, so what we did in the zoning article was, we said that each plan development project was to identify thresholds by which it would have to return to town meeting. So state in your plan development packet, what are the thresholds that send you back to town meeting? And for us on Dascom Road, through the feedback that we've received anyway to date, the primary concern is traffic here. And so that's a threshold we identified. I wasn't really aware, and I haven't heard it from anybody, that they're concerned about the exact number of square feet, as long as there's no more traffic. So traffic was our limiting, traffic is our limiting threshold.
Okay.
But, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead.
But we also do cap ourselves within the PUD document a voluntary restriction of 600,000 square feet.
Okay. Can I ask about the Article 12 says that you would have this on, this is your conceptual master plan that went on record this week with the town clerk. And in here, I read something that I didn't quite understand. It's talking about the regulations and standards. PUD regulations and standards replace or augment the town's regulation standards for development within the Dascom Road project. And it further says, they shall be applied to any project within the PUD master plan that otherwise would be subject to compliance or approval by the town under the Andover zoning bylaw. So I'm trying, is it replacing the zoning bylaw or supplementing it? Are they both still?
Supplementing.
Okay, so the zoning bylaw still has to be enforced
Correct.
and carried out? Okay, because the way this is worded, it seems to be saying that it would be otherwise. So I just want to clarify.
Yep.
That's Article 12, so.
Well, yeah, well, I know, I find it hard to.
Separate the two.
Yeah, because they're intertwined, right? Okay, so-
Understood, we've been dealing with the same challenge.
Any other questions of the board?
So what was your, you had mentioned 1 unit per 3,000 square feet. Where did that come from?
So that's a density that's already listed in plan development. There are two different densities, one in the business district, one in the mixed-use business district. The two densities that are listed in there, one is, I think, 1 per 2,000 square feet, which is more dense, more units per acre. We went with the less dense version of that. That was the 1 per 3,000.
Right, so that's roughly 14 units per acre, I think, right?
Yeah, yep.
So,
That sounds like that's up.
so that, I'll say from a density perspective, that is less dense than the historic mill district, because I believe the historic mill district is 20 units per acre.
I don't know for a fact.
So just highlighting that.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question for Paul. Paul, what's the biggest risk that you see of this article?
The biggest risk, what is being proposed here is the proponent's looking to move forward and allow the ability to move forward with restricted housing for 55 and over. The biggest risk, I guess, for consideration is whether you want to include housing in this area or not. The density speaks for itself. It's 1,000 square feet of area for a dwelling. And that's consistent throughout the bylaw in the mixed-use district today, in the general business district. What they're asking town meeting voters to consider is simply to include residential for 55 and over in the industrial zone. So the question for you as selectmen in the town is whether you'd want to consider residential housing in an industrial.
So the biggest risk is our decision as to whether we want to include residential. Like, when I think of risk, I think of the waivers. That's risk, because you give a waiver to the planning board. So that's risk to me, not, which option you want to choose, whether you want housing there.
I was referring to the housing. I'm uncertain as to what you mean as risk.
Do you mean like what could go wrong?
Yes.
Right,
Unintended
that's
consequences.
risk, yes.
Okay.
So unintended consequences. So,
Without a site-specific project, I can't say. I mean, it's an unknown. I mean, what I could say that as part of any project that comes before the board, the risk is always, looking at the traffic and examining the traffic that it would.
Part of the charge of the task force is to go through some of these things. So, I'm not ready to take a position tonight until I hear from the task force. I realize there's going to be things coming to the end, but I wouldn't recommend taking a position
Yeah,
tonight.
before we get taking a position, I just want to kind of vet this just a little bit more. Paul, while you're here, I just find it interesting, the ID2, part of the rationale for going from ID1 to ID2, the earlier article, was to provide amenities and make the industrial commercial area more attractive. And now this seems to be doing the exact opposite. We're actually inserting age-restricted housing right into the middle of an industrial area. Have we talked to the abutters, California Paint or the owners of the other properties to see, if I'm in an industrial commercial area and I'm going to plan on expansion or development and trucks and what have you, that now I have a 225 age-restricted units right smack in the middle of where I've been doing business. Have we thought about it from that perspective? Because it seems like we're injecting a residential piece into the middle of an area that was designed to be commercial
Mixed use,
industrial.
though. It's mixed use, so there'll be commercial all around it.
I'm asking about,
As a private article, I would ask the applicant if they've reached out to the abutters. From a planning board and the public hearing we have, they've received notices of our meetings and they've been informed of what we're doing. I have talked to the abutter across the street from 146, I believe it's 160, Daskin Road, and he's aware of the Lupoli project. And he has not opined either way as to whether they dislike the project or favor of the project.
yeah, I mean, it just,
Again,
it
I
just
would
seems
say-
counterintuitive that if we are trying to enhance the commercial industrial area, and I know it's mixed use, but you do have other commercial industrial areas, are we effectively getting rid of our commercial industrial area in that area by injecting residential into the smack in the middle of it?
And that's a good question. I guess when you talk about risk, that's the risk the town is talking about, whether you want to consider including residential in this industrial area.
No, don't we have a 40B that's in a, it's a commercial area, right?
That was up off of,
Shattuck Road.
Shattuck Road, yeah, I thought it was
which the
Shattuck.
businesses all complain against, but it was, they actually fought it, and they
Right.
lost in
Right.
appeal.
Right. And we kind of did this, kind of the same thing where we inserted the DPW yard into that area there, where we put a DPW yard next to the Marriott, Kind of, we inserted,
Holiday Inn, I think, yeah.
we
Right there,
we inserted public
It's
use.
industrial use, yeah,
Yeah.
but that zoned, or we
Right,
didn't change the zoning.
right. So,
I want to go back to Alex's point about taking a position on this, because I've talked to town council, and, well, I guess I'll let Tom speak first, and then I'll just relay off that. The notion of the ambiguity that's in Article 11.
Well, as I mentioned Monday, I think Rick is addressing it, the warrant article doesn't specify a quantum of vote for the master plan that's being submitted under the next article. So early on, we requested of the applicant what they thought it was, and the deal was from there, and they take the position that, it's read, it should be a majority vote, where it says, section 7.2.7, that the proposal shall be in the form of conceptual master plan, which is going to be voted upon by town meeting. And it doesn't say what the quantum of vote is for the master plan vote for town meeting. So what they said at the meeting Monday was, and what I suggested was that there be no ambiguity as to what that quantum is, because this is a zoning, and we've never done this type of procedure before with a zoning article like this, and then town meeting voting on the very next article for the plan. So I suggested that we didn't want any ambiguity as to what that quantum of vote should be, and was concerned that people voting on this warrant article, which required 2/3, might assume that because it's a warrant article or it addresses this master plan that has to be approved, that the vote on that master plan would be 2/3. Well, that's not what this warrant article says, and the proponent is suggesting, as he did Monday, that it be amended on town meeting floor so that the warrant article provides that the quantum of vote in the master plan is majority vote. So that would, and they've already submitted a draft motion. Larry,
Does that satisfy your concern?
Pardon me?
That satisfy your concern?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm not advocating for the,
No, I just-
for
the
the
concern,
quantum,
right.
but the approach satisfies my concerns. And like I said,
The
Monday,
clarity is what you're saying. You want the clarity.
somebody might make a motion and say it should be 2/3. I mean, that doesn't preclude that. But the procedure, I'm satisfied with that procedure if that's what they're gonna do, to make that motion at town meeting floor, to make it clear in the wording of the bylaw that it's whatever the quantum is, and they're suggesting a majority.
And that quantum would apply not just to Article 12, but to any future PUD that's brought in all of item 2. That's why
And that's
the
what,
feeling
so
that
we
has
didn't want it
to
to be ambiguous.
And so I think this has consequences for our board taking any position on this, because it, I assume, will be amended. But as worded, it is sufficiently ambiguous that I think it puts our board in a position where I don't think we can, I think we'd have to recommend disapproval on Article 11.
11?
Yes, because of the ambiguity of that the quantum vote that Tom just said is not specified.
But isn't that on Article 12?
No.
12 is 2/3.
In Article 11 at the bottom, it just says that in Industrial 2, any proposal for PDMD must first be presented and be approved by town meeting, but it doesn't specify approved by majority or approved by 2/3. And that was the point Tom was just making, that the quantum vote for, in this case, what would be Article 12 or any future PUD is sufficiently vague, and I think the proponent agrees and is going to amend on the floor at town meeting. But what's relevant for this board is, if we're talking about taking positions on the articles, I don't see how we have any choice but to recommend disapproval as worded in the warrant, and then at town meeting, there's clearly going to be an immediate amendment, and however it plays out. But from a procedural point of view, I don't know how we have any choice other than recommending disapproval.
Or take no position.
Well, no position, I think, I think we've run afoul in the past on that when the Board of Selectmen go, and the report is the board has taken no position on it. I think we are supposed to be taking positions as printed in the warrant.
Yeah.
With the understanding that, okay, the proponent is going to speak to you and is planning to amend it, but that's not really our role here.
So as printed in the warrant, Tom, what is the quantum? I mean,
Well,
right, I mean,
It assumes
so we're kind of wondering what the quantum is. How do you get that question answered? So what we're doing is we're proposing to them to make our lives a little easier and ask them to kind of change the warrant article to put a quantum in there. Whereas we should be able to look at this, and someone should be able to look at this and say, well, it's zoning, it's 2/3. Because
that's my problem.
Right,
If
but-
someone, I didn't want someone to say that, if in fact
right, so
the intent is majority, I wanted it clear in the wording of the article itself.
So, but legally, if this passes just the way that it is, legally,
It's majority.
someone has to say
It's
that the
majority.
quantum is majority.
Right,
Even though it's a zoning article?
yeah. It doesn't, and that's my problem, is that I don't want that ambiguity, because the way this is written, in my opinion, is the way it's written, it means it would be majority. But what I want is clarity, nobody asked that question, Dan.
Right. So, but your legal guidance is, in your legal opinion, this is the way this is written, it only requires a majority.
Yes, in my opinion, the way it's written, it only requires a majority. And they're willing to make that clear. So someone who looks at it 2 years from now, as Bob said, at some other Article 12 type thing, would not ask that question, what's the quantum? It would be in the body of the warrant article itself. If their motion passes, I mean, somebody can make a motion for some other quantum. But my concern was the ambiguity.
Yeah, and this is where it would have been helpful for planning to help contribute to this article to identify gaps like this, where, this is a pretty significant development in town, and the old public-private partnership thing. I'm sure they would have liked to have known that before they submitted the article.
I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, we do, as a preparer of the article, we do take onus for how it ends up, right? That's
Private article. Private article.
Yeah, I recognize that, but I mean.
So that falls on it. So I don't want to make it sound like the planning board in any way did us, or the planning division in any way did us a disservice. The onus is on us to put together a good warrant article. I think the way that the attorneys crafted the article, to your point that you made before, the zoning change, Article 1, does require a 2/3 vote, as all zoning articles do. Plan developments are majority vote, which is the way that I believe Mr. Herbalist interpreted it. He was just asking for a little clarification, and we're happy to clarify it.
So any planned development at any town meeting.
Because it's not technically a zoning change.
Right, so any plan development, kind of by right, is just simply majority, not just this one because of the way this,
It depends
This is
on how,
written.
it depends upon how the PUD article is written, Dan. They're all different.
So,
Under this one, in my opinion, it would be majority, but I just wanted to have it clear so that somebody 5 years from now won't ask, what's the quantum?
and our attorney had the same interpretation when he wrote it. It's just that, you know, the question was out there, and we thought, well, what an easy thing to clarify. Why wouldn't we clarify it?
Right.
So given where we are,
But I think we are in a position where we have no choice but to recommend disapproval with the understanding that at town meeting, when this comes up, there will be an immediate recognition that it's going to be amended.
Yep.
And the selectmen can even say, the selectmen's report can say, we recommended disapproval because of a lack of clarity on the quantity
similar way we
vote.
disapproved the prior article, the private article
I'm
on
sorry?
zoning. Similar way we had some language around disapproving Connie's article.
Well, and also the public records article, because
Right.
yeah, that was poorly written, it was too extensive. So we can only vote on what is in the warrant, and taking no position, the moderator was here last meeting saying it's, you know, we really got to try to avoid that, because that doesn't look too good when the board
Make
selectmen's
a
not
motion?
safe.
Make the motion.
I will,
Okay.
if we're ready to make a motion.
Well,
It's 10 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah, Laura, how do you feel about that? Just, you haven't said anything on it, so I want to put you on the spot there, but
No, it seems sort of like a technicality, which I don't say to minimize it, but it is concerning. And I think that we've, as a board, taken the position that we're going to act on the articles as they are drafted, not the way they could be.
but it is drafted as a,
Drafted as majority.
What was that, drafted as a?
no, I was going to say it was drafted as, with the assumption as being a majority. That's what I guess I heard from.
Well, but that's not written. Then we
well,
have-
it's-
No other
that's-
article,
that's
no other
inherent
articles
in the
written that
way
way
it is
either.
written, though, is what I'm hearing.
Well,
No other article is ever written that way.
So-
You don't put the quantum in every
But-
article.
Right, but it's inherent in the way it is written that it would be a majority
Yes,
vote.
yes. The way,
And you're just looking for it to be more explicit.
because of
in
the
state,
unique
majority
circumstances
vote.
of this type
Right.
of an article,
Exactly.
we're
Right.
following
Yeah,
it.
it's,
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. So your belief is it would make it a little better if you simply said majority, but it's inherent in the article that a majority town vote would be needed to
That's
approve
my
it.
opinion.
Right.
And what would happen if this passes and the Attorney General didn't like the way it was drafted?
It wouldn't pass.
What happens in that situation? It just is,
She
it's
can
as
do
if
whatever
it
she
didn't
wants.
ever. No, I understand that,
She
but
can
that,
approve the whole thing, she can approve part of it, she can strike part of it,
okay.
she can do whatever she wants.
I guess my just request as your consideration, you know, under your consideration is I ask that you please try not to penalize by sending a message of a negative vote for the sake of clarification.
And that's kind of where I was going is if you kind of assume that it's inherent that it's a majority and you're just looking for, hey, let's just really tighten it up and say that it's clearly a majority, then that's one thing. But you're right, it does throw a negative connotation associated with
but
it.
that's not, it's not what we should be
Right,
worried
no,
about, is
no.
negative connotations or the
Right,
marketing.
no, but
of
right,
the
but you're
article.
saying we should disapprove it because, because it doesn't say it's a majority.
Well,
But-
I'm hearing town council say he's sufficiently concerned that he believes, for clarification, that there ought to be an amendment to
No, we-
clarify the quantum
You can
vote.
say that in the motion.
But we also could not make a motion and leave it as written, which
No,
would be
no, you
interpreted
could,
the
and that's
same
what
way.
would concern me, because then if it gets approved without amendment, that's coming now, if your amendment doesn't come forward, okay? This board has recommended approval as is, which includes majority vote, but it's unclear about majority vote. People leave town meeting and.
But it's
at a
not
future time-
unclear. It's not unclear because town council says majority of vote is inherent in this. He would just like it to simply say majority vote. And right now we're being recorded, so that's going down in time. So it's not unclear that it's a majority vote. It's just town council's opinion that, gee, it'd really tighten it up if you simply said majority vote.
I think that's I think we have to be careful with that, because the exchanges Tom has had with this issue was clearly identified, that there was ambiguity, that the quantum vote wasn't clear, and what was the intent. There's clearly an intent that needs to be clarified. Face it, this article, if not amended, could apply to future town, somebody could call a special town meeting to have a PUD hearing to their conceptual master plan, and have it get approved under this, which somebody could challenge as being ambiguous because all zoning articles are perceived to be two-thirds.
It's not a zoning
But
article.
it's not,
But I'm saying, for the average resident who's addressed this, they're going to perceive it as a zoning article. So,
that's way of him.
okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we recommend disapproval on Article 11.
I'll second that. What's your amendment going to say?
Yes, so we submitted draft language, I actually don't have it on me tonight, but essentially it just clarifies to, rather than saying by approval at town meeting, it says, and specifies the quantum of a majority approval at town meeting. So it's just it is a clarification. The attorney felt that it was satisfactory the way that it was prepared and written, but we were under the impression we weren't going to be penalized for clarifying it. And I, and if we are to be penalized for clarifying it, we wouldn't amend it. And we believe it stands on its own.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
And if I could, if we
Further
don't...
discussion.
Right, further discussion. If you don't vote to recommend disapproval, or if you go forward with a recommended to approval, you're essentially adopting that you accept the fact that's majority vote, and you support the fact that future PUD's majority vote is fine. I just want to be clear that if we're not denying this, that's the position you're taking, so that once Article 11 passes, all future articles like Article 12 that can be brought forward by any developer, can be brought forward at any time, can be brought forward at special town meetings that they call at any time of the year, could be brought in and simply need a majority vote at that town meeting to enjoy the benefits that have been provided to them under Article 11.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just like town meeting is going to
Any
give
further?
5 people the authority to enter into a 100-year agreement, so by a simple majority vote of 5 people. So I think there's more risk in that one than there is in this vote. But
Anything further from the,
Just before we vote, I want to ask town council, just to make sure that I understand correctly. Am I correct in understanding that your reading of this is that it requires a majority vote? But if you could wave your magic wand, you would rather have that specified in the language?
Exactly.
Okay.
even though it's not in any other article, at
We've
all?
never had it.
done this.
That's what I mean. I know, but any other article at
Because we
town
have
meeting.
the next
Okay.
article, which is a town meeting vote on the plan, we've never had this. So that's why,
I get it.
I didn't want someone to say, well, this is a zoning article, so that plan must be 2/3.
right.
I didn't want
I see
that.
what you're saying.
Any further
Yeah,
discussion?
yes, makes sense.
Anything further? Yes, very quickly, please. We're trying to vote and get out of here. We have a little bit more to do here.
Steve Fick, 26 Paging Drive. This conversation changed the last couple of weeks in talking to people, and that happened with the report on high school and the enormity of that project. So there's a very technical, specific conversation going on about whether this is the right article and how to articulate it or not. But I just wanted to share the voices that I'm hearing about, oh my goodness, the revenue opportunity and not having the right revenue for the town is also a big risk in this project. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I don't know how all this fits together, but the story really changed.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, well, I
This
think
is
we
nothing-
should be getting a report of what the anticipated revenue
And
will
that's
be.
that's part
It's
of
gonna
what
be
the task
more than
force-
I think the
That's not
$60,000
part
it
of
brings
this.
in a year now, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
So it's a big deal.
It's just not.
yeah. So,
Okay, having seen no more, all those in favor of, disapproval?
Aye.
Aye.
Those
yeah,
opposed,
it's like the
opposed to
negative.
disapproval? No, opposed to disapproval, yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
I'm voting no.
Yes.
Okay, so is there any further?
2-3.
So do you want to declare, do you need to declare that, or you're all good?
Yeah, it is a 3-2
Against.
against.
Right.
Against
So,
the motion.
in that light,
Against the motion. So now we have to, if there is another,
yeah, in that light, I'll make a motion to approve Article 11.
I'll second.
any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 3-2 for Article 11. Okay, Article 12, Dasker Road Project Plan Development Master Plan. Hopefully we're most of the way through this discussion.
Yeah, I think we have, I guess probably the things that are more appropriate to bring up here are some of the commitments that are made in the plan development section itself, so not specifically the zoning language, but commitments in the plan development. And again, those amenities are additional green space over an otherwise commercial project. They are the trolley service that's been committed to promote public transportation, access to downtown, access to the commuter rail station. And again, we just feel that it's very important to meet this community need of supplying senior housing for the project. That's it.
We have a parking requirements, it looks like it ranges from 1,074 to something slightly higher. And you have above ground, underground, so how many surface spaces, how many underground?
Yeah, so
And then there's shared parking, I guess is the concept?
that's a concept, that's right. So with the all-commercial version of the plan, we're not proposing a shared parking concept, and the base reason for that is that the time that retailers and restaurants and offices need the same parking spaces are relatively the same time.
Yeah, no, we don't need to worry about that, it's really Article 12.
So I bring it up because for Article 12, we are talking about shared parking, and that's because with the mix of uses that we're proposing under Article 12, there'll be a residential component that has a different peak time for parking demand. So what we've done is we've utilized industry standards such as the Urban Land Institute, and ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers is another one, and we've applied a blended rate for what the parking requirements would be for a mixed-use project that utilizes shared parking. What we would do is, so the two numbers that you referred to, one is a weekday and one is a weekend parking, because they have different characteristics, mostly because of the office space. If that makes sense, you have more people at office space during the week than you do on the weekend. The larger of the two, the 1,400 plus, is the minimum that would be proposed as part of the PUD project. As it relates to parking under the decks versus at grade, above ground, I think relatively speaking, it's about 1,000 spaces under the deck, and about 400 spaces are open to the top of the surface. And the reason there's only 400, that's about 200 less than in the all-commercial plan, is to provide more green space areas. Why? Because we want to make sure that people who live there have green space type amenities to enjoy.
Okay.
And that's how the two are tied together.
And I didn't have a chance to get into, you gave a lot of links on the shared parking issue. Is the concept that you have a certain number of spaces, but you are basically gauging it that at different times you won't need, the retail people won't be there, the residential people be there, so if you count the spaces, it's, even though it may not add up relative to the total occupancy, it adds up because of the...
You have it exactly right.
Is that
Yep.
the concept of shared?
And the easiest way to think about it is, if you are a resident living at this project, you're very likely to be home on a Saturday with your car there as well with you. If you're an office worker there at the project, you're not very likely to be there on a Saturday. And so that's the shared parking concept as you described it. So it's not going through the bylaw, totaling up the requirements of all the different uses and saying that's the total you need. It's a more practical approach, looking at the peak times of each use and making sure that you don't overbuild your parking so that you can capitalize on the most amount of green space you can provide.
Okay. And under Article 12, your development would include a 100-room hotel.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Does anything bind you? I know your plans are to do a boutique hotel, but does anything bind you to that, or is it a 100-room hotel as long as you meet the zoning criteria? Could it be a chain hotel if you change your mind and decide to have somebody else come in?
So we very publicly said that it would be a boutique hotel, but to answer your question directly, we could propose any hotel that would still satisfy the special permit criteria through the planning board, which takes into account, for example, character of the neighborhood and the like.
Okay. And again, just to be clear, where a hotel now would require a zoning board of appeals, the revisions in Article 11 that just got recommended for approval would now make that by right.
It would take place through a special permit process with the planning board.
Well, all of it would be part of the
Correct.
process, right?
Correct, yep. And all of the special permit criteria for major non-residential projects, because any hotel would be larger than 10,000 square feet. The ID2 special permit criteria would be intact, as well as the general 9.4 special permit criteria.
Now, what if you bought the adjacent parcel? Does that get added to the zoning that you would achieve through Article 12?
No, no. So the Article 12, and there's an important figure that's included that identifies the outline of what's included there. It's the parcel currently known as 146 Dascom Road, and it's identified. If we were to say acquire additional land,
Yeah.
no, that is not subject.
You can merge that with your property?
Could not,
Okay,
yep, could not do it. Yep.
Clarify that.
Yeah. That would require its own plan development if there was going to be, more development on that parcel.
Okay.
Can I do a quick follow-up on parking? I know that the shared parking is a great idea because it keeps impervious surfaces down, which everybody likes. Is there a plan for reserve parking in case?
Yeah, so
I know we often did it.
So what we've done for the purpose of the plan development is we've identified the standards that we would use, which identify shared parking and why we think there's a lot of good reasons to do shared parking. And I know you all have experienced it with the downtown as part of your downtown parking studies that you've had done. So we've identified the standards. Now, the exact number of parking spaces that should be provided may exceed what the minimums are in there. And the reason would be to reserve parking, say, for maybe we want to guarantee one fixed space per unit that could only be occupied by a tenant, as an example, which might be a really desirable thing in an over 55 development, to know that you have your space always guaranteed no matter what time of day. As we move forward into the planning board process, we will very likely increase above the 1,400 spaces that are identified there. For the sake of this, we just want to identify the concept that we were proposing shared parking. But yeah, there'll be a reserve capacity.
Often the planning board will say, yes, you are approved for 1,400 spaces, but only build out 1,200 and leave this amount of space in reserve just to keep impervious surfaces down. So you're anticipating that? Or?
No, we're not anticipating that. So the concept you're referring to, banked parking, is a common term for it. We're not anticipating that. We anticipate really looking closely at the ITE and Urban Lands Institute recommendations, crafting what we think we need, and then building slightly more. And it'll still be less than, if you added up all the uses, so we'll still be minimizing pavement.
Rick, this master plan includes the residential as well?
It does.
So this is something that, one of the reasons on the prior article that I'm concerned about it now, because the task force hasn't given us anything yet. And on this one, I would say the same thing. So I would look for the task force. This would be part of their review of the task force to get through. So I would not want to undermine the task force, even though there's a timing issue, and vote on this without hearing from them to weigh in on it.
And just for the board's information, they're scheduled to meet on the 18th, so prior to the selectmen's next meeting.
Okay. Well, I think I interrupted you when I was talking about traffic. Did you
No,
have anything
it's okay.
further? Okay. Dan? Okay, Laura, you good?
I'm good.
Is there any further questions?
Actually, I have one question, I'm sorry. One of the components of this is that there'll be transit to the commuter rail station. So presumably, if you have individuals who are residing in one of these units and are not driving the car that they own and are instead taking the trolley or whatever to take the commuter rail, are they going to have adequate parking?
Yes.
So, I mean, is that part of the formula that one uses for these things, recognizing that that may not fit with your analysis otherwise?
That's correct, yeah. So what we'll do is, there are plenty of market studies about this stuff. When we get to the part of a planning board special permit, which I think is really important, even if this warrant article is approved, the conceptual master plan is approved, we still proceed with the special permit process through the planning board, and we'll need to justify the number of parking spaces that we're providing to the planning board to their satisfaction as well. So even though we outlined that the minimum that we would propose is about 1,400 spaces, we anticipate more. We also anticipate that because of those logical reasons, well, geez, if you're providing access to public transit, there's a chance your car is sitting there. We anticipate that the board will require more of us as well. But we wanted to introduce the concept of shared parking in the document so it was clear.
Thank you.
What is the enforcement mechanism for the age restriction?
So it ultimately winds up as a planning board condition of approval as part of the special permits, and it gets recorded on the deed as a deed restriction.
Oh, I know, but when you start renting out these apartments, who is monitoring and who's enforcing? What's the means of enforcement to make sure, in fact, that they're being occupied by 55 plus and no children under 18?
Sure, yep. So there are audits done by the management companies. It's the same as any other age-restricted complex that you have, all throughout the state and the country. And I think I know the next question, who's being sure that somebody's watching? Violation of that would jeopardize occupancy for the entire development. So it's a very serious matter, and the management company that oversees it would take on that responsibility.
So all of the other age-restricted, excuse me, developments in town or throughout the state has similar management?
That's correct.
So you won't have the selectmen going tearing in windows or anything like that, right?
We've already offered, if we see any kids, scoop them up with a net.
So, did you say you wanted to wait on 12?
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain from this vote because I don't think we're ready. I think we undermine our own task force by taking a position in this. That's part of what they're looking at.
Okay, anything else from the public, anything else from the board? Is there a mo, yes? Yes, sir.
Keith Saxton. I just had a question. I was trying to understand that, obviously there's the plan, the master development plan, but you talked about changes. There's a 10% traffic threshold, whether depending on the uses. So, if right now, I think there's 20,000 square feet of restaurant, if there ends up being 60 or 80 and less retail, how is that controlled? How's the review? I mean, I know in other developments, basements ended up being developed, would the underground parking be developed? That kind of, how is that handled? What's the process?
Okay, to answer.
Variations in the plan, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yep, so again, approval at town meeting only allows us to proceed with special permits to the planning board. One of the things we're working through with the planning board now, on the all-commercial side, and it'll be the same process for this, is that this is a master plan. We've identified uses in the plan as we see them today, but an example of 20,000 square feet of restaurants to 80,000 is extreme, but maybe it's not hard to imagine 22,000 instead of 20. And as a result, maybe 2,000 square feet of retail is removed. The threshold is the number of trips, and the way that gets controlled is through the special permit process. What we've talked about with the planning board is that each phase of the project, as it gets built, as each building is prior to applying for a building permit, we would go back to the planning board, ensure that each phase is in keeping with what was approved at town meeting, and include a check and balance of, for example, number of trips in the traffic study.
What produces more traffic, office or residential?
Oh, residential, more traffic, office by far, yeah.
Office.
About 6 or 8 times more.
Okay, so if traffic is the metric, what would stop you from just eliminating a bunch of office space and adding more residential units?
Well, the density restriction of 1 unit per 3,000 square feet of land area.
239 is your max, right?
That's correct,
Right.
yeah.
Gotta say, you know your stuff. You just sit there and it's like, wow,
I've been quizzed a few times.
I think 239 is your max. What does that mean? That's 239.
239 units based on the land area calculation of the lot.
Based on that, yeah.
Yeah, based on one unit per 3,000 square feet.
So the master plan is not a static document.
Correct.
It's a starting point.
It's a starting point, and what all it allows us to do is to proceed with the special permit process.
Right, so you'll be taking feedback from the planning board, from the task force to help improve the master plan in time. But, this is your first iteration of the master plan.
Correct. And I think, the comment was made about maybe undermining the authority of the task force. I think.
Not the authority.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have them actually do their work.
And that's why I made the point that this is the first iteration of it, and, the task force could come out with 10 recommendations, and you guys could say, well, yeah, hey, great, we're gonna do 9, we're gonna do 10, planning board could say, I wanna see this,
Yeah.
and then the master plan evolves and grows. It's not a static document.
That's right, and although we might not have the answers tonight from the task force, before we were able to apply for a special permit from the planning board, we certainly would. And I think we would have a difficult time meeting the test of the special permit, which identify that it meets community needs, without incorporating the feedback from the task force, at least at that point.
In light of the consideration that, the master plan's an initial draft of the master plan, where I look at this as we're accepting the master plan as the master plan.
Town meeting is, yeah.
Yeah, so in light of that, I move we approve the Board of Selectmen recommends approval of Article 12.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
I'm abstain.
So it's
311.
3-1-1.